Okay.
Well,
So you were saying?
he just kind of vanished. Oh, well, I guess I'll finish my thought. I was kind of a little talking over each other there, but I was just gonna say, just to finish my thought, that uh, like he was talking to me about how his any is something that he can see himself using, etc. But I pointed out that if his any isn't something that he can use to the extent to where, let's say that he can't tolerate conversations kind of being derailed in different directions, like it jars him beyond. I mean, everybody likes everybody dislikes scatteredness to some degree, but it physically jars him to have conversations continually shifting directions, and like his body energy lacks the buoyancy and momentum and excitation. Like that would be the way that we're coming to define functions now, development-wise. It would mean that his any is not fully conscious. So because so by this new criteria, to have a fully conscious any function would mean your body actually displays the excitation and energy or buoyancy. Your mind is able to branch off and diverge, and it actually kind of happens to you incidentally in a continual way. Not just that you're able to use the function in the general way that you, let's say, metabolize information, because I think that's more or less a description of that anybody can relate to if they have the function somewhere within their mind, but not at the conscious level.
I'm still a little hazy on the development distinctions, how they lay out, but that is something of a fine point.
Yeah, we're trying to get that ironed out right now. Um, uh, Partially, again, trying to match evidence to the concept, abstract concepts to the tangible evidence. Like for example, you have TESIs. Yes, pathology and behavior. You have some TESIs that are like businessmen, entrepreneurial, and the stereotypical go-getter CEO. And then you have TESIs that actually are more kind of relaxed, and they're, let's say, like James Cameron, where or J.R. Tolkien, where they're they're entrepreneurial. They maybe have their own business. They maybe have their own practice, and they're kind of mechanically minded, but at the same time, they have a seasoned sense about things. They like to take things slow. They like to create narratives. They like to write stories. They like to lay down roots. So that would be a TESI with developed TE and SI. Whereas the first one, just the entrepreneurial CEO go-getter, that's just with developed TE. Because if you just have TE without a developed SI, then it's like your TE just wants to take over the world, basically. Sorry, that's a bad term to use. Your TE wants to kind of just win at the game of the economy, whether that's a social or emotional economy, and it has a sort of recklessness on its own that needs to be tempered down by the worldview process, SI. So the way that we're going to come to define things now is more or less along those lines, where if you don't see the tempered edge, then you don't really have the PI function integrated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if a function is fully conscious, it would change somebody's personality, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if I had SI and TE fully conscious, I wouldn't look so NEFI.
Yeah, visually, yes. But their voltology would change too.
Omni delta.
I just mean delta.
Yeah, I think that I think people have been overestimating how conscious their lower functions are, and so this is gonna. I mean, and this is not their fault. I mean, this is because we haven't really defined it and it's all about relative context. So we haven't really. Oh, I should mention to you guys. right now I'm in the process of redoing the whole database where every sample is being typed by their development and organized according to their development.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite a process, but not only their development, but whether or not their FE is adaptive or directive, or whether their FI is Sealy or unsealy, and whether or not they have flat effect. So it's going to be crazy much more accurate. And what that'll do is it'll make it so that we can look at types and immediately you see twin shades start to pop up within people that have the same type and the same development. Yeah, Fairy.
Can't wait to see that.
Oh yeah, I've already started to see some of the results, and it's quite incredible. You don't really see ambiguity anymore in terms of like the range of possibilities within one type. There's a lot of range of possibilities within one type, but once you organize them by development, it's like it's a one-to-one relationship. They look quite the same. But yeah, so in this new mode of thinking, like let's say the standard development NEFI would actually just be fully conscious NE and sub or unconscious the other three, and that's actually the appropriate development. So, and I didn't know this, but actually Carl Jung was the first who said this, and funny enough, he was right, because he said that the dominant function is essentially the only one that's fully conscious, and even the auxiliary itself is partly unconscious, and so are the other ones, and they all kind of group together, and that's why he had basically an 8-type model, essentially. With he didn't pay much attention to the auxiliary because it was more negligible, whereas the MBTI comes along and says that the first 2 are conscious and the bottom 2 are unconscious, and
That's surprising.
Would the ego fixation make a difference? Say if I'm any FI, would that mean my auxiliary is more conscious?
Yes, and actually I do see your FI is conscious, and that's one of the reasons why your energy is also toned down a bit. So if you notice in your energetics, you're not as bouncy as some of the NEFIs that just have a conscious NE. And that's because, so what happens, so this is very interesting. I'm also discovering this right now as I'm going through the database and updating things. If you have, let's say, an NEFI with conscious NE and conscious FI, the extroversion of one and the introversion of the other kind of create a kind of an ambiverted energy.
I do relate to being an ambivert.
Yeah, and energetically too, the voltology shows up that way. And so, and funny enough, like this works in all dimensions. So myself as a TINE with developed FE, I have like if you look at my name on Discord, I have 2 extroverted functions conscious and only 1 introverted function conscious. And so what that actually does, and I see this in my own videos when I make videos nowadays, is I actually have a lot of extroverted energy in my voltology. That's because I have NE and FE collaborating to create that extroversion, and only TI clamping it down. So I'm actually kind of more talkative than certain kinds of introverts because of that, because I have 2 extroverted functions conscious.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
Is development of different functions distinct from subtype as we're writing it?
Yes, we're going to be differentiating the 2 to where basically subtype is taking the position of ego fixation, which is how you view yourself and which function you personally are gravitated towards in your narrative, in your life.
And that is distinct from which function happens to be your base function on the basis of temperament and so on?
Yes, yes. So there are three factors here, and this is why it's been so hellish to try to figure out what's going on between people. Well, first of all, you have a core native type that you are. Within that type, you can believe of yourself as you can affiliate your ego more or less to one of your functions. So like if you could be an FINE that thinks of themselves as a TE, so you have a TE ego, but your TE doesn't necessarily manifest consciously. And so here, let me give you an example. This is a very classic example, what I just wrote down there, FINE, FI with that development. This would be, or sorry, FINE, TE with that development. This individual would identify like, as an INTP, as a, as a let's say a scientist, but they wouldn't have any of the no TE ability, let's see, to be logistical, to be entrepreneurial, to be practical, all the aspects of TE that relate to the arrangement of the economy and the environment and all that would be absent in them. So that's why you could still say their TE is unconscious, even though it's ego fixed to the degree that that's what they're focusing in their mind on. So they are, let's say, into programming. They're a mathematician or a programmer, but they're not necessarily somebody who's got TE conscious, because what it means to have TE conscious is to have that that priority or that ability.
I notice you have a lot of in the database. You have a lot of science-y type people, programmer types, whatever, in that general,
Mm-hmm.
close to that typing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Must be, yeah.
it's interesting then, because it suggests that, I mean, since a lot of them are very good at that sort of thing, that it's sort of the skill of that is unrelated to the unconsciousness of the TE.
Yes, and so here's the funny thing with me. Like, let me use myself as an example.
Okay.
I have unconscious SI, and yet, holy hell, like, people say, like, who was it? Simone Music was telling me, how could your SI be unconscious if, you have all this voluminous data that you work with, and cognitive type is a very sensory model, and that is true, and I use sensation a lot, but I always and only use SI for the service of helping my TI arrange its castle in the sky. Like, so basically, my TI has this castle, and like it's basically got SI as a slave worker helping create the castle, but I don't use SI for anything other than that. Like, I don't fancy the things that SI dominants use. I don't, like, I don't take to genealogy and history. I'm not very encyclopedic. I don't want to learn, anything about the earth or the narrative of things. I'm very daunted by that sort of thing. And I'm not very temperate at all. I have no sense of temperance. I only do things in the scattershot format as they come to me, and so on and so forth. So that's an example of it, of in myself anyway, of why a function can be utilized a lot while still not being fully conscious.
Ferry put in the chat actually the autonomy on the list of criteria for fully conscious,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess that would be the autonomy part. In that case, it'd be like the
Mm-hmm.
not even necessarily the skill with which it can work, but whether you actually care about pursuing the goals of that function.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
And a part of this is a spiritual journey, really. It's and what I mean by that, like, I really believe this, that part of this is a spiritual journey, because you could liken the development of SI, like in me personally, as the individuation of the Senex archetype into the psyche, which is another way of saying learning to be a more stable, grounded individual in my life. So learning to be somebody who can settle down into a routine and a life, and just basically appreciate my existence in the finite confines that it is, because and I resist that. Like, my psychology resists that, because I'm looking so much at potentiality that I don't want to pick what I want to be. I tend to not want to be a thing. I'd rather just be a potentiality that never becomes a thing.
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as I become a thing, I'm just that thing. And but that's how SI looks at things. So SI would say, you know, you have the name you have the family you have the heritage you have. You are this. You were born in this place in this world, and that's a fact. And it is a fact. It's not incorrect about that. But it owns that. It owns that and actually makes the most of that.